podcast. I am one of the three hosts here for our live Thursday night podcast. I have also Matt and Steve along with me, and it's been an interesting week. And I want to jump the week off by talking about what's happened at the Washington Post. It's kind of crazy. I got a couple of things to talk about, but this is my main topic. It's been going just nuts over there as they laid off a third of their staff. And here's the thing that surprises me that's filled social media, all of the channels, and it's really been nonstop by those working at the Washington Post. And that is the absolute lack of disconnect, those people have with you and me, with the normies, with the everyday people. We always talk about Washington, D.C. as being in a bubble. And God, is it in a bubble like you just can't believe. I don't think there is a more perfect example of a bubble mentality that encompasses that city than what's gone on at the Washington Post. The Washington Post has been losing $100 million a year in the 5 years that Jeff Bezos, or however many years, in the last 5 years, I think he's owned it for 10 or 12 years now. But in the last 5 years, it's been losing $100 million a year. And so Bezos finally has taken that paper and he cut a third of the staff. The staff have all taken to Twitter and taken to social media to complain that this is the end of democracy and I lost my job and what's the world going to do with the Washington Post, completely misreading the room in that no one cares. Because no one outside of Washington, D.C. reads the Washington Post. Now, they have people in I had no idea. People were getting laid off in, absolute third world countries, every other European country, in the middle of conflicts in Ukraine and other places. They're finding out that they got laid off because they're reporting news completely one-sided. I don't care who you are. I don't care what side of the spectrum you're on, completely one-sided. And then wondering why these people whose job it is to deliver the news, to go out and research stories, find out information and bring it back to us, are dumbfounded that their newspaper that's losing $100 million a year because they're on largely to a subscription model. The subscription model has flatlined because the only people who are subscribing are the congregation that are adherents to the same ideology, the same theology, the same religion that almost everybody working at that newspaper has and believes, which is a left of center ideology. So they don't know why they lost their jobs. And literally, these fools are going out there going, I don't know what I did wrong. Jeff Bezos is, this guy, he's the worst devil ever. We all lost our jobs after, for years and years and years, these people have done nothing but piled on Donald Trump and anybody that follows Donald Trump and anybody that votes for Donald Trump, because they live in a bubble that does not tell them that the large majority of Americans aren't interested in what they have going on, in what they're peddling, in what they're giving out. And no idea, no thought that I need to provide a product like every other businessman, men and women in the world. Every other one in the United States has to sell a product at a price that somebody is willing to pay for it. And if you alienate half or better, it's got to be 3/4 of the population with your far left-wing drivel on a regular basis. I don't care if you like the left wing, call it far right-wing drivel. If it's far right-wing drivel, they shouldn't be given any special benefits either if they can't make a living. The problem is the far right-wing guys have a much easier job making that living because the far right-wing populations, the public, support them. The far right wing is much smaller. So the amount of people to draw from are significantly less. Therefore, the newspaper, who only caters to that one small minority, is dumbfounded when their paper can't make enough money to pay them to continue to spout their opinions rather than doing what they're supposed to do, deliver the news. And I'll say just a perfect example of that is the 4 years that Joe Biden, who we all know now was asleep at the wheel the entire time, the largest cover up probably in American history. No, I'm going to say that's probably the largest cover up in American history. And the Washington Post, the paper of record in dark democracy dies in darkness. Their coverage of that story was zero. So, the largest story in American history, the biggest cover up in American history, the fact that Joe Biden was infirmed over his 4 years happened directly under their noses. They were there the entire time and they said very little. And so they like to go back and talk about how they said some, but they didn't. They said very little. And what they said had no impact. It should have been on the front page every single day, holding the people accountable, holding the powerful accountable, but they didn't do it. And now they don't understand why their paper can't make any money, not even make money, but losing $100 million. It's a good thing one of the richest men in the world owns them, or they would be out of business. So that is my take. I want to talk about the Washington Post layoffs and the complete disconnect by the people involved, the people working there who lost their jobs, who I have zero sympathy for because they did not read the room, because they were ignorant enough to live in a bubble. Here's what I'll say about living in a bubble. You have to do, particularly as an entrepreneur, particularly if you're on the outside looking into entrepreneurship and you want to try to do something, especially if you are trying to work your way up the corporate ladder with an idea to continue to get promoted and maybe ultimately starting your own or being in charge of the company that you're working at. The worst thing you can do for yourself, like these people at the Washington Post are learning, is be in a bubble. You need to get out and hear other opinions. You need to have people, a mentor or a group like the Kronos group, giving you feedback and advice that doesn't feed your narrative, that tells you a different story and that makes you think, because this is what will happen to you long term. The value is not having people tell you how great you are. The value is in having people outside who have a different perspective telling you what you're doing wrong. That's where the money is made. That's where the commissions come from. That's where the bonuses are going to be made. When you get promoted, that's where the promotions are going to get made. When you go start your own company, that's where your chance at profitability and success is going to come from, by people telling you what you don't know, what you should hear. Doesn't mean it's all right, but you need to have both sides of it. And when you live in Washington, D.C., like all the Washington Post's employees do, when 8 out of 10 of the most expensive zip codes in the country are in and around Washington, D.C., when 90-some% or 87% or whatever it was, I think it was 91% of everybody in Washington, D.C. votes for one candidate, you, my friends, live in a bubble. And at some point, that bubble is going to do what all bubbles do. It's going to pop. And when it does, you're going to be on the never saw it coming. That's the problem with living in bubbles.
Yeah, I would say, Jerry, the other thing that I see is I don't know anything relative information wise that comes from the Washington Post. I couldn't recall an article or a letter or even a freaking newspaper for a while. And those things that they were always like so monumental for when it comes to the print, when it comes to getting out information, the journalism, they didn't turn into a business that should be utilizing social media. They didn't convert. They kind of stayed old school. And yeah, they had the accounts, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be relative within how news is shared today. Like our news right now, given an example, I get a lot of my news from YouTube. And it's not always from the big corporations that used to, legacy wise, give us that information. It's from independent journalists, independent reporters that you could call them reporters and journalists. That's not their title. They just have a YouTube channel, but they are invested into getting right information out. Now, will they have an opinion? Of course, because everyone has a right to their opinion. Doesn't mean that I have to believe or listen or agree with everything they're saying. But a lot of my like business acumen, a lot of my knowledge, a lot of my news comes from listening to other podcasts that they talk about this overarching topic and then go into detail about it. The Washington Post didn't do anything with that. They were stuck writing articles, putting it in a paper, that I think you have to pay for like certain posts, like the New York Times does that, where if you go on an article on the website, you can only read like the first like 10 lines and then it makes you like hit a paywall. That doesn't work. People want information and they know they can get that same information for free, quicker, and intuitive to how we consume news and information in today's society compared to the legacy setup of how it used to be for only newspapers. But argue if I'm wrong, but that's where I don't see them adapting to anything that we're doing in today's society.
I'm old enough to remember what it was like to read the paper, and when everything I got was from the paper. That's the only place to get the news. I mean, because if you could watch the news, but you had to watch the 5:36, or catch it at 10 or 11. I remember when it was sports and you missed it. It's like there was no way to know what the scores were for games that day, say on a Saturday, until the next day or till the paper came out. But I think what a lot of the problem is that it used to be that you could read the paper and you had an editorial, and you had editorials on the sides, and you or somewhere in it, you'd read somebody's editorial, and each editorial had, you knew if they were leaning more left or more right, but they were known for that. So when you read it, you knew you were going to get that opinion. And then on the other side, you could read somebody else's, maybe a more conservative editorial, and you'll read their opinion on a particular subject or topic. Or then you could read it, on the left, more particular. And it was a great way to get perspective. And you weren't being told anything, you were just reading it. And I think biggest problem with papers is the whole paper now has become an editorial. Everything is definitely, like, if it's more left, it's a left newspaper, not a left, not a right and left editorial. And the news is just neutral. You read it, you interpret it how you feel about it, but there was everything put into it. And I think that's what people are tired of doing. They know that. They're not dumb. And to Jerry's point, a vast majority of the people are on more of the conservative side, and they don't want to read something that's completely, endorsing more of a liberal mindset perspective of everything. Everything has that slant, and it starts to wear on you subconsciously as you read it. And that's why you just get turned off, because you're not allowed just to process the news and interpret the way you want to, and then read your editorial sections. And they were interested to read, because that was when you were really getting an opinion and a viewpoint. So you'd read them and you get a little fired up, and they got great comments back, had a lot of great interaction. But when the whole paper becomes an editorial, then there's nowhere just to get the neutral news, just to read something, to listen to something. It'd be interesting to go back and listen to maybe some of the older in the 60s and 70s of just a regular evening newscast, whether it's a local one or a national news, and see how we listen to it. And like, well, that just sounds really neutral compared to one today, where depending on the network, it's definitely going to have a perspective. And so I think it's just people are tired of it. They're tired of it subconsciously, how it wears on them. And so people are going to listen. And to Jerry's point, the people that eat that up is a small minority of the country compared to the country at large. It just seems like in our minds, like, well, it's like 50-50. What the problem is most of that is controlled by more of a liberal mindset. So the news networks, the newspapers, even the magazines are going to have that, viewpoint to it. Look what just happened. What was it? The Grammys, the overall theme of that. And people quit watching that stuff because they don't want to see it. Your movies at times today are barely tolerable to watch anyway, much less watch you get rewarded for pretending. You know how to pretend to be something you're not, and that's where a lot of that comes from, becomes insufferable. Jerry's word. It's insufferable. But I think that's the biggest problem with the papers, is that the whole paper is become one big editorial. And there's places you want to go, just read the news, read what happened, and get just kind of a general objective, reporting of what really happened. Hey, this is going on in this part of the world, or this went on in the stock market today. And then I remember going and reading editorials because they were specifically right, left, wing, and just to see the perspectives and the viewpoints. Like I was saying, they had tremendous amount of followers on each side of it. But when the whole paper becomes it, you just get weary of it. Mentally, psychologically, you just burn out. You get tired of it, so you just become disinterested in it.
Yeah, it became an opinion rag, and the thing that people have to watch out for. I mean, I'm looking at the Atlantic newspaper, which is, again, a left-wing newspaper, clearly. So anybody that wants to follow that certainly can. But its headline is "The Murder of the Washington Post. Today's layoffs are the latest attempt to kill what makes the paper special." The thing's losing $100 million a year, and it says we're witnessing a murder. Jeff Bezos, the billionaire owner of the Washington Post, and Will Lewis, the publisher he appointed at the end of 2023, are embarking on the latest step of their plan to kill everything that makes the paper special. The Post has survived for nearly 150 years, evolving from a hometown family newspaper into an indispensable national institution and a pillar of the democratic system. But if Bezos and Lewis continue down their present path, it may not survive much longer. Think about how idiotically retarded you have to be to write that sentence. Just think about it. I guarantee you, whoever wrote this, and we'll go to the bottom here, about the author, is going to have Ashley, sensible glasses. Well, no, my bad. But she looks like she could have sensible glasses, right? I mean, they all look the same. They all feel the same kind of look to them. These reporters that just live outside of the economics that all of the rest of us have to live under. It's that simple. They just don't. So I have the Washington Post, to Matt's point and to yours, Steve. It just doesn't matter anymore to anyone except the people at the Washington Post. And that's what they miss. There's more information to be gathered, more opinion to be gathered, more news to be gathered on Twitter X than on any newspaper, on any other channel possible. In fact, as a longtime purveyor of all things digital, all things video, television, news stations, and all things paper, having read newspapers and books voraciously my entire life, I should say, the death of a newspaper at all is meaningless to me, because when something happens, this really crystallized for me when Trump got shot last year. When Trump got shot last year, I didn't go to Fox. I didn't go to CNBC. I didn't go to NBC. I didn't go to CNN. I didn't go to the Washington Post. I went to Twitter. And as I was following along on Twitter X, you're getting news in real time. So along came the elections in November. And it's the first time that while I had the TV on, I knew what was going to happen. And it was it was 100%, 10 to 15 minutes earlier on Twitter than it got reported on television, on the major news network. So we knew that Trump won 10 minutes before the rest of the country, if you were following along on Twitter, because you have the wisdom of the crowds and you can choose to filter through the ideology that you want. And if you get something and you're smart that you really agree with, and it really sounds like the truth to you, you got a little grok button and you push the grok button, or there's a community note at the bottom. All of these assholes at the Washington Post that are unreadable because they get one side, if there's, go back, I'm sure it's 95% against Trump. There's got to be 1,000 tranning 15-year-old stories in there and all of the rest of the garbage that nobody cares about. You can hit a button now on X and it will give you grok, and grok will tell you the history behind it. You can ask it as many questions as you want to make up your mind if what you're given is legitimate. There's community notes where other people gone in and have done that and give a different perspective and say, no, I know you said X, but here literally is what you said a year ago, which is the opposite of what you just said. And so the Washington Post has lost the all meaning. They don't understand that they're dead. I think that most major media does not understand that they're dead. Fox News, CNBC, CNN, all of them, they're dead. They just don't know it yet. Some of them are dying faster than others. And this is just the beginning of the end. This is going to, like the transiting of children, which this woman, 22-year-old woman, just won a lawsuit. I believe it was in New York for $2 million because the poor thing got her breast cut off at 16 years old. She sued the doctor and the psychiatrist who only saw her 2 times before they did this to her, and she won. That will be the beginning of the end for these movements against minors, because as soon as one lawsuit happens, 1 billion are going to follow. No hospital will support this. This is how this Nazi-like program will die on the vine. The Washington Post is the same way. They're delivering a product that no one wants, and they just don't realize it yet. But when this goes, the rest of them are going to be like, oh, I get it. Like Jimmy Kimmel, right? Getting laid off and he's almost losing his job. Like The Late Show. What's that guy's name on The Late Show? He got his this is his last year. He took over for David Letterman. His name escapes me. But they gave him his marching pay, or gave him his get out papers, and he's finishing out this year, and then that's gone. Those used to be the most profitable businesses in media, was those late shows. Jay Leno, Johnny Carson, and I mean David Letterman, massively profitable shows. And now they're losing $40 million a year. Did Jeff Bezos do that to The Late Show? Did Jeff Bezos lose all of the late shows, cachet, lose all of its audience, making it irrelevant to only a bunch of boomers that are all liberal anyway and want to listen to that one side of the story, to ruin the comedian, to turn it from what it was in Johnny Carson and Jay Leno and David Letterman into the nightmare that it's become that nobody watches? You don't have to yell at me if you don't think the same way that I do politically. The facts are the facts, and those shows are dead. Jeff Bezos didn't kill those shows. Jeff Bezos didn't ruin the number of people watching those shows. The comedians ruined those shows. The people running those shows killed those shows. And the same thing has happened at the Post, and it's just going to continue. I, for one, am here for it because I love competition. And what the Washington Post was doing is the opposite of competition, because they had Big Daddy Warbucks down there spending $100 million a year on what is something that ultimately is going to disappear forever.
Yeah, it's one of those moments, Jerry, where I don't understand how all those employees, no one was batting an eye at what was going on around them outside of that building or outside of those four walls that they were writing these articles for, because no one saw the writing on the wall. Clearly, technology came. They didn't adapt. They wanted to keep it to where the journalists and the editorial was the framing of how we're going to have our news shared out to the world. And with AI, they didn't even incorporate it. Like what you said, social media, Grok with Twitter and X, Instagram has its own AI, Meta has its own AI. Like everyone has their own AI because they knew the user didn't really care about how you portrayed the news. They wanted to then decipher for themselves as a consumer, what am I taking away from this and how do I feel about this? With traditional media, it was a one-way street. It was like going through the drive-through and they're just giving you a lunch and you're like, dude, I ordered a burger and I got a slice of pizza that's been in the oven for 12 days, it looks like. Oh, here you go. Who's next? And it's just like, well, I want to return this. You can't, because traditional media was set up to where it's only one way, their perspective, their opinion. Here's the news. Now with social media, you can throw a comment in. You can engage that person. You can talk with that person. You can have a conversation. I wasn't having a conversation with the late night host. I'm not having a conversation with the news stations. They're just doing what they're doing. But I don't understand how even people in traditional media have, over time in the last few years, you've seen a number of podcasts start popping up because people leaving ESPN, people leaving late night TV and just starting their own stuff because they know they can engage with a consumer at a different level and share out that information across every platform besides a website article and a newspaper. Everything else is like so transactional, and you can truncate it, you can package it differently, you can split it apart. Whereas once you get an editorial lock, it's editorial lock. You only have so many words you can put on a paper. There's only so many words that you want to put on a blog. But when you actually have real information that's coming from a different perspective outside of what the corporation is telling you it should be like, whatever that frame theory is, now you have an opinion. Now you can have other people have opinions. Doesn't mean you're going to agree, but it makes for such a better way of engaging news and information and conversations.
Yeah, they weren't delivering news, they were delivering opinion. And I will tell you exactly why it makes no sense to any of us why these things, how are they delivering something no one's watching and they're ignorant to it? It's because they're not selling you a product. They are evangelizing. They are inside of the religious mind, hive mind that is current far left woke politics. So it is not an opinion; it is a religion. I get asked down here in Nashville, Jerry, what's the problem with those people up in Portland, Oregon? I mean, you tell us these crazy stories about naked people wandering around and nobody helping them in the middle of November, and drug dens everywhere, and people strung out, and feces on the ground, and drug paraphernalia everywhere, and camps with tents in the middle of the street as far as the eye can see. How can that possibly be? And I say the same thing that I've said, that we in these last couple of generations have been able to see something that has never really been observed before in modern times, and that is the creation of a religion. And the religion is wokeism. And the religion of wokeism does not, you are either in or out. There is no middle. So you have to be a fierce adherent to the religion of wokeism. And what that means is, I know millionaires, smart, educated, otherwise reasonable. I've known them for 20, 30, 40 years. These are self-made people who crawled up out of nothing and became something, that have fallen into this wokeism. So much so now that if somebody tells them in their structure, in their hierarchy, which is typically the state, if the state tells them that the sky is dark at noon, the sun is at its lowest point, not its highest point, and you try to argue with them, they'll never talk to you again. In fact, they might try to do violence on you. They'll certainly wish violence on you, because you're now a hypocrite. And if you're a hypocrite, if you're not about men being able to breastfeed children, you're a hypocrite. It's not, let's talk about the reality of this thing. Let's talk about what we're doing. Let's talk about the outcomes. No. There are no outcomes. There are only a belief. And whatever happens downstream of that belief is fine. We have to be adherent to the belief. There's no arguing with those people. You cannot change the mind of those people. And so in that, as I explain that, it starts to make sense. The unexplainable becomes explainable only in that you understand the fervency of an ideological, a religious adherent to the thing that they believe. And they believe that anything contrary to their opinion is going to be the end of the earth. All of us believe quite the opposite. We believe what we believe. But if you want to believe something crazy, have at it. Just don't let it infect me. Just don't get it over on my side. The problem is that's not good enough for them. Like the Nazis and the communists that came before them and the socialists that came before them, if you don't believe what they believe, in the name of diversity and equity and inclusion, we will stamp you out. We will throw you out of society. We will crush you into the ground in the name of inviting everybody in. That's, Matt, is why those people can't see outside of that bubble. That's why they're so surprised when the rug is pulled out from underneath them. And I'll say one last thing. These are the same people that just a few short years ago, under Biden, I didn't do that. That was a mistake, but a good one. Under Biden, that were making fun of the coal miners who were losing their jobs, if you'll remember this, and told them all to go learn to code, right? Because the end or the end of the world is coal. And so we're going to stamp out coal, and anyone that hurts, again, back to the ideology, right? Back to the religious adherence to that ideology, coal is bad. And so it's not that if we stop doing coal, we're taking food out of children's mouths. No, that's okay. That's fine. That's no problem. Those people, because coal has to end, the ones that are affected, the downstream results that I don't care about because I'm parroting, right, what I'm told to do by the pastors and the leaders and the what is it? You got pastors in a church and you've got elders have passed down, which is always the state, the people in charge, have passed down these opinions, and they have to parrot them. So even if people get hurt, it doesn't matter to them, so much so that they flippantly said, yes, we stole the work your grandfather did. We stole the work that your father did. And now we've stolen the work that you're doing in terms of coal by not allowing you to go and mine it. But it's okay. Learn to code. Those are the same people.
And evidently we've stole the land that we live on.
If you're whatever that actress's name or singer, whatever she is.
Yeah, that blew up really quick when you realize that every nation on earth that's ever existed, look out, even within the Indians, not to digress, but even within Indians, you just do a little history, which they'll never do because, they want to believe, to your point, they want to believe the bubble they live in. And they want you to believe it. And that's a big point. I think that's what creates such the drive of people that will adhere to it because they know there's no middle ground. I mean, there's no compromise. Either you fervently believe what we believe or you're the enemy. Either you're 100% with us or you're the enemy. It's not like, oh, you can go be neutral if you want to. And it was just interesting. I heard somebody expound on that whole thing about stolen land, which that's really blown up given that I think her name's Billie Eilish. She lives on property that was actually owned by, Indians before that. Are she going to sell her, Hollywood, Beverly Hills, whatever it is, mansion out there, give it back to them? But you don't even realize the history of how many of the Indians all throughout the history before we settled that area. One Indian group totally took over other. It happened in Africa all the time. Complete nations to take over. It's happening today. It has nothing to do with us completely taking over it. But I believe there is a lot of that. To your point, that they're blinded and they can't objectively see that the product they're pushing, if you want to call it that, nobody wants. And they can put themselves in an echo chamber, so they just get a very little kind of feedback to see if they're going to do it, much like an entrepreneur working by themselves. And all they do is listen to the employees and their family who really can't offer any real advice on how to really grow their business. They live in the unintentionally, but it's where they're at. They live in that echo chamber instead of stepping outside of it and getting perspective and help. I was looking up something here while we were talking, and I was looking at some of the old Disney. Disney's done the same thing. Let's make a new modern, which is definitely more of a woke version of it, and how unsuccessful. As a matter of fact, it's cost them a lot of money to try to make these remakes, but they don't mind. The people don't mind if you take something and you expound on everything that was good about it. But when you try to replace its core beliefs, that's when the general population is like, yeah, I'll stay home. You catch wind of it, and you can now. You don't have to accidentally buy a ticket and realize, oh, this is complete, BS. We have social media. We have people giving reviews right away in little clips, and you can start to see like, yeah, this isn't what we want. I thought it was something. I looked at The Lion King, and when they made it in, I think 94, in today's dollars, that movie made $1.9 billion in today's dollars at that time. Show me a movie today that's coming anywhere close to that. Anywhere close to that, on that, where they've done a remake or even some of the newer ones, and that's why things like last night, or other night, whenever it was, it doesn't even catch my radar. I have to see people reacting to it to even know it happened, which I'm just fine because it's just a little echo chamber celebration of, themselves.
It's funny that you say that, Steve. Another topic, we'll move on to another topic because I think this is one that will resonate. There is a show on, it was either Netflix or Prime. I think it was on Prime, called The Wrecking Crew. It's got Dave Bautista and it's got, you'd think I'd have
Jason Momoa.
Jason Momoa in it. And it is, look, when I watch Netflix, and I got to cancel Netflix as it turns out, because apparently I got to do some research here, but apparently, according to Josh Hawley, the senator from Missouri, 40% of the children's programming is infected with LP or with pro golf, ladies pro golf, with
Alphabet Mafia.
Yeah, correct. With tranny stuff. But I watched this movie. And to your point, Steve, it's funny that you bring that up. The movie it might as well have been a Sylvester Stallone circa 1980s or 90s. It was a Schwarzenegger movie. It was a Von Damme movie. It was a Chuck Norris movie. It had all of the things that we adored about movies and the reason that we went to them. It was nonsensical. There was always the bad guy. The bad guy got over early and lost late. The two dudes could be hurt, but ultimately they prevailed. They did nothing but hammer each other like two dudes would, left and right, the entire time. The women never kicked the shit out of some Navy SEAL, right? Never beat the hell out of a ninja. In fact, spoiler alert, right? They get captured and the men go and save them. And the movie was an hour and a half, and I thought that's a fantastic. I really enjoyed that movie. Look, it's not Shawshank Redemption. Don't get me wrong, but like those old movies of my youth, this movie did not put any of the woke BS. The way that I watch a movie, decide whether or not to watch a movie. If it's an action movie and it's got a chick on the front, I pass because I refuse to watch because Black Widow ruined movies forever. It seems maybe they'll get their, to your point, Steve, maybe they'll get themselves back on track making things that we want to watch. This is not my opinion because no one is watching their garbage. The movies that come out that get watched, like John Wick. How did John Wick do? All those 3 movies or 4 movies, fantastically. How'd the spinoff with the ballerina chick do? It's one of the biggest failures of the year, right? I don't know whether the people making that movie lost their freaking minds. One of the things that we appreciate about John Wick 2 or 3, I forget which one, is they had some chick was in charge of the bad guys. Ultimately, she fought John Wick. John Wick slapped her upside her head a couple of times and then knifed her in the throat or whatever, and away she went.
It was probably one of the quickest battle scenes in all of the John Wick movies.
I was going to say it was like 20 seconds. I mean, she got a couple good hits on him, and then he just slammed her up.
It was probably 15 seconds too long. We could probably say that was woke also. Because
he also fought halfway through that movie. So at that point, he's probably pretty exhausted before he's about to go and then defeat the final.
Yeah, she was just going,
right.
She's deaf.
Yeah, right. So, we literally have very specific, very obvious examples to use in the John Wick universe. All 4 of those movies, I ran to the theater. The more over the top they are, the better. But the time you throw some ballerina out there and she's doing her kung fu on 10 Navy SEALs, you're just like, this is unwatchable. Again, comes back to the Black Widow. I loved Marvel. I loved every part of early Marvel. The Black Widow was horrendous. She had no superpowers whatsoever, and yet she could beat up these guys left and right. It was always a plot spoiler. She ended up getting her own, or a plot failure, I should say. She ended up getting her own movie. There were, spinoffs of that. If it's not like Wonder Woman, who had power. Okay, I get that. Wonder Woman should mess up the dudes because she's a god. She can do those things. But Black Widow's a chick, period. That weighs 100 and she looked good in the outfit. I mean, there was, I'm good with that, but she, I just watched, the reason why I'm raging about that is because I just watched the first Iron Man, and I got this kind of movies to talk about. The first Iron Man last night, I watched it, or second Iron Man, excuse me. I watched it last night, which really kind of was the set off for the whole universe. The Thor came after that, and all of those movies, they kind of started to introduce those movies. What a great time to be watching movies. And as I'm watching that, Scarlett Johansson, we don't know she's the Black Widow yet. She's kind of infiltrated Tony's inner sanctum there and is his assistant. And she's a complete smoke show, right? In that you're like, oh my God, I want an assistant that looks like that. Complete smoke show. And then you turn out she can kill 10 guys at one time. But to your point, Steve, that you were making originally, to go back to that, I think that there's too much ideology. There's too much religion. You wonder, how do they spend billions? How do they get away with losing billions? How do the stocks continue to trade the way that they do? How can Disney be worth $150 billion less than it was, 6, 8, 10 years ago, and still the same people in charge? How can there not be a revolution inside of these companies? And I don't think it comes down. Ultimately, the green money usually usurps anything ideological, because ultimately everyone is a slave to the green, especially in Hollywood. But in this case, the only explanation I can have for Target and Bud Light and and movies generally, and Hollywood generally, and the late night shows, and television, scripted television, all of these things. The only thing I can attribute it to is that this woke religion that we have seen created over the last 10 years, they are such adherents to their religion that they refuse to see outside of it, and they just continue to behave accordingly. They're not going to make movies if we can't have an LBGTQ1A33/pet in Star Wars, because we're not making the movie, because why would we if we don't have that? So then they make the movie and nobody goes and sees it, but nothing happens, because the success was in making the movie and making sure that the one dude isn't a dude, but it's really a girl, and we're going to spring that on you in the third act.
Yeah. Oh, I think for me, Jerry, the craziest thing that I've seen in the last, I would say, probably few weeks has been the move for Netflix to start taking on podcasts. And I see that as a good move from a corporation or business saying, hey, we see a lot of people tuning in to video podcasts. So, in efforts to gain their attention back, we're going to start buying up or pitching partnerships and deals with certain podcasts. The problem that I have with a major network or a major business buying up podcasts, which are individual people that are just like, they created their platform, they've done well, and they see a dollar amount and they're like, man, that will set me up for the rest of my life. Yeah, might as well. The problem is that it's still up to Netflix to determine who they want to have as a podcast on their program. And it's still very selective. And what I would say is, from the looks of it, at least for now, the ones that are uploaded up there, it's all based off of what Netflix wants to continue to prioritize across the board of their ideology of, hey, we're going to have someone who's funny. Hey, we're going to have someone who like talks about personal development and health and good health and like good feelings. Then they have others that I've never even heard of some of these podcasts. And I'm like, wait, but they're on Netflix. And then I started thinking and I was like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it just seems that they're taking the traditional news media route, which are their journalists, their editorial people, and saying, hey, talk about this stuff, but talk about it in this way. And so then it starts to lose the personality of what that podcast was probably to begin with, which was expression of like anyone's ideas and bringing them to the table and having conversation or having their own opinion. Now that opinion is being influenced by Netflix, not them just being able to talk like we are right now on our own podcast, because we don't have to answer to anyone but ourselves. And that's where these podcasts that are signing up and creating these deals, it's not a Joe Rogan Spotify deal. Spotify, I've heard enough from Joe Rogan to hear and understand that they've just said, hey, here's the partnership. We want to be able to monetize and grow your brand because it already has such a huge presence and following. And we want to take that from YouTube and leverage it within Spotify. But one of the things he asked Spotify was, if we do this deal, can I talk about what I want to talk about? Can I have guests on that I want to have on? And you guys can't have a say in that. They were fine with that because they knew his show would only be as successful at that point moving forward on Spotify if he could do it the way he did it from day one. But as soon as you start signing up for some of these media companies now, that's where it starts to get a little dicey, because now what they originally talked about, they got to make sure they frame it in a certain way and talk about it a certain way. And they can't go too far in this one topic with this one opinion as they used to prior to having that partnership with Netflix. So I was just interested to hear, like, what is your take on this whole podcast and bringing them on to major media platforms?
Steve, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think anything that takes it and starts to reduce its ability to have it, because what people like about a podcast, it was supposed to be the last bastion of, true honest opinions. You have a conversation, whether you agreed with it or not, and you could listen to it. And that was the great appeal. I think that's why so many people shifted to listening to those, watching, listening, however you want to go about, getting the information from it. And I think what happens is too much is that control of the narrative that they want to do. It's just any way and however we want to. Now, if they can throw some money behind it to control it, then absolutely, because that's how a lot of it's driven. But the problem is that's what's not going to appeal to people. People aren't going to be interested in podcasts that start getting watered down. Everybody likes the discussion, whether they agree with it or not. They have to, admit down at their core that they like the idea of two people going at it with differences of opinion up to a point, except for those that are incredibly radicalized and just break down at any suggestion of anything that goes outside of, to Jerry's point, their religion and how they believe about it. I digress for a second. I saw a clip from somewhere in California, of course, a school board meeting. And somebody that was at the school board was talking about how, and they mentioned homeless. And I can't remember the term now. But anyway, there was a lady that was on the board sitting in her throne. And she said, do you know what the term is? She said she didn't like it. She was offended. She actually sat there, and you think she was acting, because she was acting like she was like physically upset about this and distraught as she was trying to talk, that they called it homeless. And they really, it's not housing impaired, but it's something
Unhoused.
like that. Unhoused.
Yeah.
Unhoused. And then they brought up, well, that's homeless is how the state of California laws see it. Well, just because the state of California says that doesn't mean we have to do it in here. And the first thing I saw when I saw that clip, I said, that's the problem when you start usurping authority. When it makes it look like it's normalized, like you have a right to go against the authority that's not breaking any kind of moral, ethical law, except for the one that you decide yourself, by yourself, or in a very small group decides, okay, this is immoral and ethical. Doesn't matter if the law's been set up for that and it's operating totally within the laws that were set up to, protect this nation in the sense of like immigration. But but I thought that when she said that, well, just because they do it, and we don't have to do that in here. And I thought, that's your problem right there. It's kind of the old idea, everybody did that, which was right in their own eyes, which is not the building of a civilization. It's interesting with these things. I always thought, go found a nation, give them a piece of land, and you start building anything of worth, of value, of anything that could become anything useful to the rest of the population of the planet. And take those ideas and those philosophies and see it. The only reason they're successful, the only reason they can do all this, it's kind of like the kid that inherits the money from the rich dad who still owns all the businesses. And he says, I'm going to go do all this stuff. And they blow money left and right with all these fantasy ideas. They're following their passion. They want to be an artist this week. Next week, they want to be a philosopher. Next week, they want to do this, because they're funded on doing that. When if it had to hold its own in a general marketplace, it'd never make it. It'd be broke. And that's what happens a lot of this. I think the very thing that makes us so great is what lets them to be their feeders, negative. They just suck out the energy of a society. And because they have the freedom to do it, they can exist, but they produce nothing of themselves. They don't produce a society. They don't produce a structure that anything could really exist in. If you took everybody has that far left thinking mentality, give them a piece of land, give them a big area, build your own cities, build your own, whatever you want to call it, structure. It would never last. We could just sit there and eat popcorn and watch it just demise. It'd be like the worst Survivor show ever that you were watching, because nobody would make it. Everybody'd vote everybody off the island, within months. And so it's something to me that I think this is only sustained because they live in the bubble of what really works, in the marketplace that works, in the structure of law that really works. Because as soon as they feel like they're being violated, they want that law to protect them.
Yep, I agree. I'll just give my 2 cents on it, Matt, that along those same lines, I think that, Pat McAfee went into ESPN and blew that place up. I remember very early on, it wasn't in his first couple of weeks, I think, that he was went in and said something that upset all of the people up above. And if there's a more woke company that better is a better example of the impact that wokeism has on their business and their model, it's ESPN, which just happens to be a Disney product, and they own ABC and those different outlets. So you can see firsthand when you're worried about what everyone's color is and where they come from and what their background is, and rather than how good they are at their job, you're making sure that the people doing the announcing, or they're running the show, is you got a girl and she's got to be black, and you got a white girl and she's got to be white, and you got to have a dude but one's got to be white, you got a dude, it's got to be black, and we probably have to throw a Mexican in there somewhere, right? When you get out of who's really good at it and you just start plugging these people in, you get what ESPN has gotten, which is just continuing diminishing ratings. In fact, Disney's talked about spinning them off on their own because they are such a drag on their earnings. And Pat McAfee went in there and said, okay, I'm going to make you this big deal. ESPN had no choice but to take on Pat McAfee. They had to have the eyeballs coming and watching what's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, sports show in the country. So Pat got paid, and Pat said, I'm going to say what I want. And he said what he wanted. And he has continued to say what he's wanted. And the show does well. The rest of Disney continues to rot. So Disney isn't, or the rest of ESPN continues to rot. So imagine you have this one part that does very, very well. You do battle with it because it does very well, but you don't like its opinions. So then you just settle with it and just let it go off there and make all of its money and bring all the viewership and all the people watch it. But you're going to continue to do the things over here that don't work, right? You're going to continue to do the things that destroy the business. That is what is going on. And so the podcasts at Netflix, if they are limiting what they can talk about, who they can talk to, if that's the case, and that's in their contract, and Netflix ultimately has control, well, those shows will see the same fate in the long term if they're not able to say what they think. And remember, most of what Pat McAfee has to say in his approach to the world and the way that he speaks his mind, like so many independent podcasters, is what most people in the United States believe or think. We are all about 85, 90% believe the same crap. The fringe that has the biggest voices are the smallest percentage. And so, unfortunately, they happen to have media. They happen to have academia. They're able to control somewhat the narrative from that perspective. They've got Hollywood. So they've got the entertainment there. But the reality is those shows, if Netflix is doing what they're saying, then those shows are going to suffer. I find it hard to believe that that's the case, because I think one of them is Dave Portnoy's, what's his company?
Barstool
Sports. I think one of them are the video side, not the audio side, but the video side of Barstool Sports. I can't see Dave Portnoy, who I think is a joke. By the way, I'll just put that out there from a business perspective. I think the guy's massively, lots of props. He's done very well for himself, but I think he's a joke. I think he's a bad influence. I think that he is the opposite of what all men should aspire to. In fact, while we're talking about that, I'll just finish that thought. I don't think that he should, or that he would sign a deal that would curtail his ability to speak. So if you heard that, Matt, I haven't heard that, and I'd be surprised if Netflix is able to sign one of these big podcasters. I don't really think I care how big the contract is to not be able to do what they want to do or say what they want to say. But stranger things have happened, and to your point, people will chase the almighty dollar, without thinking twice about it.
Yeah. No, and that's where I think for me, it's just an interesting take, because they're one of the first platforms to actually start picking up podcasting in general. Like you have Hulu, you have HBO, you got Peacock, and they've had documentaries, they've had other different series of content that they put out where it's very much more on the independent side. But Netflix was the first to say, hey, we see the eyeballs here. We see people are actually engaging with it. So we should probably partake in this rather than just try to keep doing what we're doing, which is essentially not working.
Yeah, and watching a 4-minute clip on Fox or NBC or CNBC, it's unwatchable, right? With these commercials, and it's 8 minutes long. I want to listen to that long form conversation.
And then the commercials are all big pharma.
Yeah, they're all pharma. That's right. Yeah, Matt, I sent you a link. Just my last subject here as we're going out. I'm going to defend Steve and I And Matt, you can be our witness to defend Steve and I. Play that link if you would. Speaking of Dave Noy, who it's funny that you brought that up. So play that link so we can all see it, and then we can comment on it.
Yes.
You just got to play the first, 25 seconds of it.
Yeah.
Hey, while you're pulling it up, it is something I saw the other day, though, that you had your collection ESPN has of, like you said, it has to be all the right, mix. It's like a crayon box. There can't be two of the same colors, the same types of things. And I thought it was interesting with that. There was one guy that's like, there's no way that guy even played a sport in his life. Not that that matters, but it was a bigger heavyweight guy. The way he was, I've seen big ex-NFL guys get bigger, and they're bigger in a different way than this was. But to your point on that, that's exactly it. And they don't like McAfee because he gets to do what he wants to, wear tank tops. I've heard them say things slamming against the very thing that's paying all their bills.
Right. So this, changing the subject, this is, the internet has just hammered dude for being 50 years old, and you can't run like this when you're 50 years old. The reality is, this is what it looks like when you lead a life of debauchery and you don't take care of your health and you smoke a ton of pot and you eat a ton of pizza. And as you get older, this is what's going to happen. I almost think that the dude has got an injury. This is so brutal. But reading about the X posts on this.
Oh my gosh.
And then he
Who did he race?
I don't know.
Like a regular dude?
I don't know who he raced, but look at him jumping up and down like he did something. Right? Matt, play it again. Show dude running.
So you see this guy behind him, he's pretty far back. Like he's at least like 50,
and they're only
10,
racing, I don't
yards.
know what it is, 40 yards, it seems like.
If that.
Yeah, so here he goes. I mean, what am I looking at? If you can't run at 50 years old or 55 years old or 60 years old, I did my 4 miles on the treadmill today, freaking treadmill. I did my 4 miles on the treadmill. And clearly this was so
That's the dude he raced.
Yeah.
That's the dude he raced.
I don't know what the story is behind it. But
just clearly his shape, you can tell he's probably like a lineman, or if he played football, if he did, but anything, he's a bigger, heavier set guy than Dave Portnoy here.
Right.
And for him to start that far back and like this run right here, like he looked like he pulled a hammy.
But the internet has gone crazy about what do you expect dudes in his 50s. So I'm like, all right, we're talking about this at the podcast because I promise you, and Matt knows this, I'm 57, Steve's 60. Homeboy ain't coming anywhere near catching up with me because I'm full on sprinting that thing out like it's nothing. So this belief, this idea that has just infected social media over this video, what do you expect, dudes, whatever. No, dude eats way too much pizza, smokes too much dope, bangs too many young girls, and doesn't have a life to live for. So that's the result when you live that lifestyle. Talk to me about how successful he is, how much money he's made. Just fine. Great. You know what I would rather do than be 100 millionaire or 400, 500 millionaire, whatever he is, and have a private jet and fly over banging young girls? You know what I'd rather do? I'd be able to run 20 yards on a full sprint, or I don't even know if that was 20 yards, that's 15 yards. So, and anyone who says, oh yeah, sure, it's just because you don't have that money, wait till you're in your 50s. Wait until you're in your 50s. And that Steve and I'll show you how to run. I don't know, how far do you want to run? Full out run, right? Because I won't even have to warm up. If I walked outside right now, I'd go full on run 100 or run 50 yards without thinking twice about it, as hard as I could. 100, I do that without thinking twice about it. So just because I'm in my 50s, because other dudes are in their 50s, doesn't mean this is what you have to look at. So I got to push back, number one. Number two, to Dave Portnoy in particular, anybody that tells me, yes, it's just sour grapes and you're pissed that you're not 100 millionaire and you take his money over his health anytime, wait till you're in your 50s. And then you start to realize how little money means and how much your health means. Steve-O, floor is yours.
Yeah, well, I've been smiling. You got to go to the comments. You realize most people think the same way we do.
Yes.
Like Dave running like he had a stroke, runs like Quasimodo. It says, what's a poop race? Dave running like he has his pants full. Geez. He said 10 stride race. If it had 12, he'd have lost. You know what it looks like to run with a dump in your, but you're right. It really doesn't. And you do. I talked to enough people that would give all kinds of money to have their health, you know,
Yeah.
what I do in sales.
Runs like
And I've heard that.
Quasimodo.
Yeah. 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 That's why
The
I had
internet
one
is
of those.
undefeated, my
I
friends.
had one of those tripped running to the comments type of moments when I saw that. I thought, oh, there's got to be 17-yard head start. And then somebody's like, possibly the single most impressive display of pure athleticism I've ever witnessed. Somebody else put a real metaphor for life and entitlement.
Ooh.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't, because, you know, what's the little saying? I'm going to mess it up some, but you know, when you're healthy, you want everything. But when you're unhealthy, you want one thing. You want your health. And it's not till you lose it or couldn't lose it, or you see it sitting there on the horizon, that you really realize, you know, I'd rather be poor, but making it, have good health, than to have the money, but then just be limited, suffering every day, you know, just less and less. You know, everybody thinks they would do it, to your point exactly, Jerry, until you get there and you realize how much value it means for the quality of life you're able to live or not live. It makes a big difference. You know, there's a lot of stuff. If I don't have a lot of money, but I have my health, I can go do and experience in this thing we call life. But there's a lot of it, you know, when you don't have that health, that, you know, that money just doesn't mean anything. If you're, you know, in a walker, you can't get around, or you can't really go do things to really make life what it is. Or you surround your things doing things in life that's money, but especially if you have a lot, you don't have anybody to do it with. And I think as you get older, you realize it's the relationships that really matter. I mean, it really is. Now, if you can have relationships and money, fantastic. And health,
right,
great. I mean, that's the goal. That's not a bad goal.
And you can, but one of the comments here is 17-yard head start, folks. Age has caught up to Dave, which is just completely not true. But man, is he good at what he does and surrounding himself with a bunch of talented people. So, you know, again, he has no children. He has no wife. Therefore, from my perspective, he has no life. He has nothing to live for. And when he dies, you know, again, great, make all your money. But there's no legacy. There's nobody to remember you. You will, you know, disappear in the annals of sports history as somebody that, you know, did very well for yourself. But there'll be nobody to care for you except those that you're paying to do that, because it'll be like you never existed. You have no legacy, so you have nothing to live for. That is not a life. And at 57 years old that I am, Steve is 60, and Matt will learn this, you figure out really quickly that it's just not about the money. In particular, after you've made the money. If you've made the money, it should be time to go on and get your life. If that's what you're going to end up, no amount of money is going to save him from a horrible death. There's no amount of money. There's no guarantee that we're not going to die of a horrible death. But I guarantee you, again, that if I were running that race, it would be, number one, it wouldn't be 8 steps, 9 steps, right? We're going to race the 100 yards. Is the 25-year-old going to have to give me a head start? Yes. Am I going to sprint that bad boy out? Yes. Am I going to look like Quasimodo running it? No. And I don't care how much money I had, I would be ashamed. But he's so ignorant, right? He's so in his own head. He's so narcissistic that he thinks he won, while everyone makes a fool of himself. You say, well, he brought people in and people are watching a show and he's making more money. No, that is not what to aspire to, folks. That's not what rich looks like, people, because when you get to be in your 50s and 60s and life starts to have an end date and you start to see the people around you die, you start to hear of the people that you grew up watching die, and you start to get a sense of yourself. It is not about the money. It is not about the things that you've owned. When you're on that deathbed and you're by yourself, what are the relationships? Who are the people around you? That is the stuff that matters. And whether or not you had your health down the end of that race is going to be the most important thing. So I would say to this person who said he's good as what he does, Dave should stop right now and go get healthy. When you're that rich, you have no excuse. You have no reason not to. So you should go do that. Good for him for his success. But the fact that anybody's going to emulate that, to me, is a huge mistake, because that is not where you have to end up just because you're chasing success.
Yeah. 2 things, Jerry, I want to add to that. One, David Goggins is 50 years old.
Yeah.
So I know he is a freak of nature when it comes to his drive, but he is 50 years old. And he talks about how everything's breaking down on him. Like he's had knee replacements, hip replacements. I mean, pretty much everything he's had to replace, or it's just bone. There's no cartilage. And he still does these crazy feats at 50 years old. And I don't think he's stopping anytime soon. The second thing is what you said about Dave's circle. Everyone at Barstool, unless they're an athlete, they're just sports opinion commentators. They're good at what they do, which is why they're at Barstool and why it's a successful business. But it's very similar to, I feel like, business owners and entrepreneurs. Who you surround yourself with, you start to become in your health, in your thinking, in how you see the world. And for business owners that are listening to this, or people aspiring to be business owners and entrepreneurs right now, that is one of the few things that I've had to change in my life. When it was at one point, I'm surrounded by just friends that I knew for a few years in college, to I have to put myself in a completely new environment, find new people, people like Jerry, people that are other mentors of mine, to give me sound advice, but not only advice, but be able to see and be living life around these people that challenge me to keep pushing myself. And it sounds like, from Dave's point of view, no one's challenging him. He's the boss. So, well, if he's only succumbed to everyone else around him who's below him, how is he going to grow? How is he going to be healthy? How is he going to think outside the box compared to like what's around him, knowing that he has total control? And that, like you said, that narcissistic mindset of everyone has to answer to him no matter what. And if that's what you're surrounding yourself with as a business owner, and you have other employees, and you're only around that every day, you will be thinking at their level. You will not continue to grow and push yourself because you don't have other peers at your level that are doing bigger and greater and pushing each other things to be able to grow to that level. So that's why I'm so excited about the Kronos group, is because that is what the peer-to-peer group is all about. And it's exciting because, yes, is it going to be easy? No. It's going to be hard conversations. It's going to be pushing yourself. It's going to be thinking outside the box, things that you've never had to deal with before, and having those kind of conversations with people that have either been down that road, done that thing, and said, hey, hindsight 2020, you might not want to do that. You might want to try this instead. Or, hey, we're in a similar boat. Let's figure this out together and figure out how to overcome this obstacle or around this scenario or this event that's going to happen that could be a detriment to my business, to my overall health, to employees that you have working under you. That's what I'm excited about with the Kronos group. And that's why doing this peer-to-peer group, I'm excited to be in those conversations, in those rooms, because I know it's going to be a room of people challenging each other, not having to answer to one person who thinks they know it all or is better than everyone else around them, because that's the room that someone like Dave has put himself in. Whereas the rooms in the Kronos group are, hey, you might be someone by the dollar amount, but to your point, Jerry, you were making more money than everyone in your own group. And just from a matter of a few examples and a few podcast episodes that you've talked about it, clearly you didn't know everything, and you had to get out of your own way to then learn, educate yourself, listen, and push yourself beyond what you thought you were even capable of by yourself, let alone like with a family and with kids and all that stuff. That's all the foundation for a lot of growth as a business owner, especially as a man. But just within the environment you were putting yourself in, you had to separate yourself from your friends when it was all about the bar, all about the pool table, all about sports, and talking about that and educating yourself about that, to, oh, I got to find a whole new group of people to aspire to be around, to want to be around, that I know will push each other to greater unknown challenges that are in the near future that I'm excited for, because I want to take on that challenge head on.
That sounds like a perfect way for this to come to an end and Steve-O to do his job.
Well,
What do you
first, I
think?
want to thank everybody for joining us today. And if you have any comments about some of the opinions we have, we'd love to hear from you. You're not going to hurt our feelings. Trust. If you listen to us long enough, you're not going to hurt us. Love to hear, love to get some feedback. And if you are interested in getting help in a peer-to-peer advisory group, do go to thekronosgroup.org. That's thekronosgroup.org. Hit the button there, sign up for a time just to have a call. It's free. We'd love to talk to you, see what you got going on, see if there's anything we could do to help and actually help grow your business, help solve what I like to call your Monday morning problems. And with that, opportunities are everywhere. You got to go get them.